I like the fact that I'm being seen and that I'm not trying to be unseen. I do want to be seen. In the sense that I want people to feel the presence of being photographed and see what's on their face at that moment when they notice me and or the camera. I like that. I like because then you're feeling the person more, and there's more of the actual humanity in the picture because they're wearing a face that they haven't rehearsed.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Eyeshot 50mm. And today we're sitting down with Richard Sandler. Richard Sandler is one of the most important visual custodians of the late 20th century New York, a pure street photographer, but also later on a documentary filmmaker. Richard has recorded the social, political, and aesthetic transformations of a New York that was hungry, violent, but yet very, very deeply alive. Richard, thank you for being with me today and welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Nice to see you and talk with you again.
And for everybody who's watching, I just want to leave a very small message to keep liking and keep subscribing, because what's just a very small click to you, it means the world for us to bring you exclusive street and documentary photography content. And since a couple of months, all our interviews are available as podcasts on all major broadcasting platforms. Richard, let's just start and dive deep into the very first question that I have for you, which is, who is Richard Sandler, according to Richard Sandler?
You asked a difficult, easy question.
Yeah.
Who is Richard Sandler? Now I'm a photographer and a street photographer, and I'm also a saxophonist, and I am a filmmaker, and I suppose I wear all three hats.
Yes, I like that.
I live in Vancouver, Canada now, and I shoot film only on the streets here in Vancouver. It's a difficult place to photograph, nowhere near as easy as New York. Very challenging because people are very private, much more private. It's very different than the U.S. here. You know, it's got the British influence. You know, the manners and the touchiness. You know, and not so much of the British humor, but it has people like to hide here. They hide it, and they don't like being photographed. So it's difficult. It's
Yes.
quite a challenge. It's also a very difficult city to photograph for other reasons because there's a tremendous drug problem in this town. It could be maybe the worst in the world per capita. And there's so much suffering and so much sadness and violence on the streets in parts of this town. It's kind of a tale of two cities. You know, it's very wealthy and very, youth oriented on one level, but on another level, it's deeply depressed. So it's an interesting town. It's a very interesting town to photograph in, but I don't know honestly if I'm up to it. But I'm giving it a shot. I've been photographing here for 2 years, and I'm not real happy with what I've gotten so far. And I switched to video. I want to actually start shooting video in Vancouver. So it's still a work in progress. But I have many other projects that I've got going on. So I don't know if I even have the time for this. I have films that I need to finish and films that I want to start. And filmmaking is pretty much, I do shoot every single day. I never ever stopped really shooting street photographs. But I think the real focus that I have now is on getting films made.
Interesting. We will get into movies and films later on because I have a section just about that. And I want to go back a little bit at the origin of your gaze, because you grew up in a post-war New York. and you spent quite a lot of time there, and then you moved to Boston, then you came back. But staying on this part of your life, how did the city's architecture, rhythm, chaos shape the way you saw the world and consequently the way you did photography? You do photography.
Well, I started photography in Boston, and about 2 years after I started photography there, I moved to New York City. That would be exactly actually the December of 1980. I moved back to New York City, where I'm from, and began shooting quite a bit every single day, pretty much, in New York at that time. And New York was both easy and difficult to photograph in. It was kind of dangerous, in those days. There was a lot of street kid gang violence, and it was very lawless. The crack epidemic had begun, and so there were, people out of their minds on drugs, in many parts of the city. It was dangerous, but I didn't ever really feel threatened. But I did have to be very careful. But New York is New York, and so it offered so much. It's a very easy place to photograph. People didn't get uptight, even with using the flash, which I was using, from the beginning when I first started photography. I started using the flash on the street in Boston before I moved to New York. And, I was just another street photographer. There were plenty of people who were out on the street. I shouldn't say plenty, but there was, a good number of people photographing on the street. And obviously many had done it before me. So, I took my place in line, so to speak. And I didn't get very much recognition at all in the early years. Nothing really but rejection of my work, and which in a way was good because it kind of freed me to do my own thing, to follow my own path. In Boston, I had taken a workshop with Gary Winogrand. I know you want to mention that you want to talk about Winogrand, but and that was very good because I really learned from him quite a bit in a very short period of time, and it had a big influence upon me. So, I was in pretty good shape. New York was a great place to photograph. I didn't really worry that much about my safety because I felt safe, and I was young, and I was fast, and I could avoid conflict very easily. So,
There's a word that you always connect to street photography, the street photography that you do, which is soul. And I wanted to ask you, what does it exactly mean to you to put a soul into a static, two-dimensional, black and white frame? What does it mean?
well, there's many ways of talking about it, but initially we're talking about the people or person that are being photographed. So I think if you depict people and the arrangement of people in a way that is innovative and respectful of them at the same time, you can hopefully make a few pictures that do have soul in it. It's not an easy thing to photograph because, people tend to be in their own bubble on the street and somewhat private. So I'm looking for emotion. I'm looking for rawness and truth of the people I'm photographing. I'm not going to talk about my own truth quite yet, but that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm trying to be very aware of, the world photographed, the world inside of a frame.
As you mentioned before, in 1977, around 1977, you had this workshop with Gary Winogrand. And the very first thing I want to ask you, is there like a piece of advice or a way to approach photography that truly stayed with you and in some ways you have implemented in your photography, or it was more subconsciously done?
Well, I think it was more subconscious than anything else because I started photography and I didn't really know anything about it. I started from zero, but I knew that I had good vision. I knew my eyes were good. I knew that I had very good peripheral vision and always felt that I might be a good photographer if I were ever to start photography. But I already had two careers by the time I started photography, one of them being an acupuncturist. And I practiced acupuncture starting in 1971. I went to school in England and studied there for 3 years in a school in England, acupuncture school in England. And that was my life at the time. But when I started photography, it became so, I was so passionate about it that I really didn't have time to serve two masters, as they say. I had to stop practicing acupuncture. So that was a big change.
For sure.
And I was hooked. I felt like a photo junkie. Yeah, I couldn't not do it. Every day I'd get up and I'd hit the streets in New York City and photograph all day long when I didn't have to work, which was most days.
There's one thing I feel like that distances you a little bit from Winogrand, because Winogrand used to say that he did not photograph to make social or political criticism, but just to show the world how it looked when photographed. Instead, your photographs are it's pretty hard not to read a very strong social consciousness of what happened around you. So how would you describe that? And is there anything in your work that Winogrand probably would have not liked in a way?
Well, personally, that doesn't affect me in any way. All I can be is my own photographer. I can just, but it's wrong to say that Winogrand's pictures were not about social issues. They're very much about social issues. He just didn't want to be pigeonholed, to be, that to be described as what was the previous designation, the concerned photographer. He wanted to break the chains of that limiting diagnosis, shall we say. And so Gary was, he was much looser than the Photo League and the people that came before him, who were like dedicated social activists, very left leaning, even socialist or communist. That was the tradition of the Photo League, which is what Winogrand came up inside of that world. But he wanted to, like I say, break the limitation of that and photograph in a much looser and celebratory way. Actually, he loved all aspects of photography, and he's famous for saying everything is photographable, which meant that literally everything. So that was the thing I took from him. When he said everything is photographable, that meant landscapes, that meant architecture, that meant plants, that meant everything you saw. So that it was a great lesson, and I took that very much to heart, and I've always been making photographs other than street photographs from the very beginning. So I don't really censor myself. If it's something interesting to me, whatever it is, I'm potentially make a picture of it. Now, I don't think there would be anything in my work that he would object to, frankly. I learned a lot from him, but always made my own pictures. My pictures are generally more serious than his, I think. They're more thick, shall we say. And yeah, I very much include social issues in my picture as much as I possibly can. And this is just who I am. He was somewhat different, so he made his pictures that included, socially aware things and things that were just, crazy moments that just happen to all of us. So I tried to incorporate the best of all of the people's work that I had studied and liked, particularly also Friedlander and Arbus, and my contemporaries also on the street at the time.
There is one thing that I really enjoy and I would love to talk about with you, which is your book, The Eyes of the City, which has a very interesting approach, because in your photograph, people often look into the lens as well. And I wanted to ask you, what really happens in that moment? How did you deal with that moment? Because looking straight into the camera, especially in today's world where everybody's like just looking down on their phones and not looking around them, what did it mean at the time? Because it could have been read as confrontation, silence. How did you deal with that? It's a let's say hot topic in photography, the eye contact and how to get there. And I wanted you built like quite of a legacy on it as well.
Well, eye contact can work, and it also sometimes cannot work. I very much wanted to find that moment, that first moment that I'm being noticed by them. Sometimes that still doesn't work. That's not always going to work, but sometimes it does. So sometimes it reveals very, very much about the person or people that I'm photographing. And I like that moment. I like the book. The book is called The Eyes of the City, but it's about their eyes. It's certainly about my eyes, but it's also
Of
about their
course.
eyes. I
Yeah.
like the fact that I'm being seen and that I'm not trying to be unseen. I do want to be seen. In the sense that I want people to feel the presence of being photographed and see what's on their face at that moment when they notice me and or the camera. I like that. I like because then you're feeling the person more, and there's more of the actual humanity in the picture because they're wearing a face that they haven't rehearsed. They're wearing a face that is a response to an extent of me, but not all my pictures are like that. Many pictures are the people are not looking at the camera also.
Sure.
I like both situations, and
Absolutely.
it's just a matter of whether it works or it doesn't work. And, of course, most of them don't work, but when people are looking at me, the cover of my book, for instance, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 people in the photograph, and they're all looking at me. Every one of them is looking at me, and I really and I'm looking back at them, and I like that.
Yeah.
There's a
It's
tension,
so cool. Yeah.
there's
Absolutely.
and a strength. It's like it's very well that picture's very well put together. So when you have like different eye lines and they're all going to me and mine is going to all of them, it feels like something that is uh, made by the photographer. I like that. You feel the photographer. I do like that. I don't like to be 100% always be unseen. I like being seen.
Like invisible or that kind of things. And then what makes for you a gaze memorable? What makes you feel attracts to the subject itself? And when you look back at your edit and everything, what makes it for you memorable? Like, okay, this makes the final cut and this doesn't.
Well, anything can work, whether people are looking at me or they're not looking at me. But certainly it's just that indescribable sort of cross between chance and luck. There's so much chance involved, and it's luck too. What it is it's a moment of serendipity where things come together in an interesting way. And I can recognize that when I see it sometimes. And sometimes that results in a wonderful photograph where everything seems new. It seems like it's been done only by me at that time. So I'm trying to be awake to those kinds of moments.
Your photographs also are known for sharp juxtapositions as well, I would say. So, for instance, we could have women in fur coats next to perhaps homeless people, or you have the capacity to showcase, I don't know, opulent billboards with scenes of decay. Like also New York had lived a very strong gentrification at the time as well, was living sort of gentrification. Today, juxtaposition in street photography, I feel in contemporary street photography sometimes is overused in a way. So how did you understand at the time in a fraction of a second that frame had a very deep historical but also political and social value that you were sharing to the world as well, also in today's time?
Well, I mean, this does get back to one of your earlier questions about social commentary and such. Yeah, I'm looking for photographs that have a kind of diversity within themselves that tell a lot of stories, perhaps, and are maybe asking more questions than they answer. So, yeah, I'm looking for a complex situation where there's a lot of life and where there's conflicting realities going on at the same time. That is life. It's not just one thing. So trying to get as much into a frame, psychologically, even spiritually, into a frame is not easy. It's very difficult to make those kinds of photographs. You look at Winogrand's best pictures, and they're a combination of a lot of emotions. There's a lot going on. I definitely took that idea or tried to make pictures similarly because I like that very much. I like the fact that a photograph can represent a whole range of issues and complexities. So, yeah, I'm trying to make pictures where there is contrast between different ways of life, different economic spectrums, or different truths that tell a larger truth.
And a lot of people, when looking at at your photographs, they see them as, let's say, documents of a New York that kind of has disappeared. When you look back at these photographs, do you feel like, do you look at a New York with a sense of nostalgia, or do you feel they were already speaking about the world we live in today, especially related to New York, of course?
Well, the thing about a photograph is it's time that's stopped. And when you stop time, whether it was 25 or 30 years ago or the present, it's still the same thing. They're both frozen in time. And they tend to have a life of their own. It makes them outside of time, makes them timeless, actually, once you've stopped the time. They're timeless now. They're no longer in time. So
Yeah.
the relevance of photographs 30 years ago is very similar to the relevance of photographs today in many, many instances. That's one of the things that photography has going for it. And I like that very much. So nostalgia, not really, although I am, there's a frustration in cell phones on the street. I have a very, very difficult time putting anybody on a cell phone who is on a cell phone in any of my pictures because they're not there when they're on the cell phone. They're somewhere else. And it's not interesting. They're not in the game anymore. They're outside of the game. They're living, they're walking down the street, they're talking, they're in a bubble, they're somewhere else. So that has nothing to do with the street. I mean, they're out of the game. That's all I can say. And so it's frustrating now because so many people are on the phone and it's hard to make a picture that doesn't have somebody on the phone. Because to me, that ruins it, it's like farting on a train or something. It just ruins the picture. It's hard. So I don't know. It's changed. Everything has changed in terms of these devices that we walk around with.
I
So
like that.
it's difficult. It's difficult.
It's totally different.
It's
Yeah.
it's more difficult, really, to photograph now in that sense.
Okay. And I will get back to that in a second. I just want to like staying on the topic of technicalities, distance, images, and everything you've been doing so far. Because if I'm not mistaken, in terms of lenses, you've moved between a 35 and a 50 millimeters quite a lot throughout your photographic journey. How does your this emotional distance or involvement with the subject change when you use a 50 millimeter lens rather than a wide angle lens?
I rarely use a 50 millimeter lens.
Okay.
I've never used 50 millimeter lens very much. It's 28 and 35 that I use, and 28 more than 35. I like them both, but mainly 28. 50 is, it's more difficult. It's more, it has less depth of field, of course, and I don't see that way. I see more wide angle than 50.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah, it's. I mean, also with a wider angle lens, you have more margin for error. To the point is to make it easy, but of course you have to get closer, and in getting closer, that changes the level of intimacy that you're having with the people, in this case, in my case, that are being photographed.
You mentioned before Flash, and there are many of your contemporaries that made close up Flash like their signature as well. But you almost maybe would have preferred natural light more during your career, even like, I guess, the poorest available light. Why is that choice? Why do you prefer to use natural light rather than Flash, even though you've used it and played with it and everything?
Well, I don't prefer one light over another. Using the flash is just a response to the fact that in the wintertime, when there's less light and if there's no sun, then it's a gray, dark day. And I'm just trying to use the flash to be able to make photographs at f8 or f11, but also be shooting at a longer shutter speed. So that's a different kind of picture. It's really two pictures in one. It's the flash, the moment the flash goes off, but it's also the eighth of a second or quarter of a second or 15th of a second, whatever it is that I'm using, that extends and the length of the shutter being open, and that causes blur if I'm moving or if anybody's moving within the frame. It's two images at that point. It's the image of somebody moving that's blurry, but also caught in a moment, either at the beginning or the end of the exposure when the flash goes off. And I liked that very much from the beginning. And I was taught that technique by my mentors in Boston when I very first started photography. So I just, when I moved to New York City, I just transferred that, to my practice in New York. And New York is very dark in the winter because of the tall buildings. There's very little light. The sun is low in the sky. So many days are really quite dark. And if I'm shooting, for instance, 400 ASA film on a dark day, the natural light is maybe a 60th or of a second at f 2.8 or 4. And that's kind of death to a street photographer. You want to be shooting at 8. So I would shoot it at 8. But again, as I said, I would extend the shutter to make up for, let the light come in with time as opposed to aperture. So I'd be shooting at f8, shooting at f11 at a quarter of a second or a 15th of a second, and making these pictures that had a ghostly image from the blur of the long shutter speed, but a sharp one nonetheless as well. And I did that whenever I had to, which would be on dark days. It would only be on dark days that I could do such a thing, because the Leica has a synchronization speed of 50th of a second or below. You can shoot with a flash with an SLR at 125 or 250. So that changes. That was not open to me since I only used Leicas. I could only shoot on these dark days at a 50th or lower. So that determined, that particular look. And I liked it very much, and I used it, like I say, from the beginning. And I was the only person using the flash on the street in New York at that time. Bruce Gilden, my friend, who I know from before we were photographers, because we were living in the same neighborhood, just at the end of high school, and so I taught him this technique. He wasn't shooting with the flash. He basically asked me to teach him how to do it, and I did this technique of using the flash with longer shutter speeds on dark days with a Leica. And this was great for his career because he was already a very interesting and very skilled photographer. So it just helped him,
It's pushed him.
it upped his game, and we would shoot together very, very often, and it was good. We were pushing each other, you know. But the best thing was that I knew him, from before I knew him when we were kids. I think we
Love that.
met at age 17 or 18.
The interesting thing about Flash, I always like the idea that it truly screams like I'm taking a picture. So for you, that you tend to like more to be visible in a scene compared to other people's, for sure, is something that screamed it even more. And confrontation is not always easy to resolve.
Yeah, well, there's no hiding it,
Yes,
when you use a
exactly.
flash. Well, I mean, sometimes there is hiding it, particularly if you're photographing perpendicular to people. If you photograph profiles, they don't know that you've photographed
Don't
them.
even notice.
But when I do go up to somebody with a flash and hit them with it, you know, full frontal flash, there's no hiding it, and so I had to learn how to deal with the fact that that was gonna cause people to be uptight or not. Sometimes people would get upset, so I had to really have my game together in terms of explaining sometimes to people what I was doing. Not that the explanation would always be adequate, but, I
I tried.
you had to be able to, smooth out ruffled feathers, sometimes, and I would do that as best I could, and I don't shoot with the flash anymore because I don't wanna make that picture anymore, and I don't want to, it can be startling, and I had, some episodes where it was difficult for people, it was painful for them, and, I don't wanna cause any heart attacks out there. I don't anymore. I don't wanna make that picture anymore. I've made them, and I don't wanna do it. I don't wanna do it anymore. But but I might still do it, depending on
Be
circ
careful, all of you.
it's only because I'm 80. I'm not 34 anymore. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 80 years old, and I don't wanna get punched in the face any I and also I don't wanna fight back. I don't wanna hurt anybody. So, that's a little bit of a dilemma, for me, to tell you the truth, but
Yes, no, I totally understand. One very also interesting part that I always think has a very interesting origin in photographers is that you are also, as we were saying before, a filmmaker, which is very, very interesting for me. And you did different documentary, and you did also one on Times Square where you show its transition from like a red light district to this paradise for tourists as well. And the very first question I have for you is, what did film give you that photography couldn't give you at the time, or like now still? What is the difference that makes you go for it?
well, they're in many ways opposites. In still photography, I take a picture and move on. I'm not out to have conversations with people or make friends or enemies. I'm just take a picture and move on. But with video, shooting video and film on the street, you have to stick around. The difference between video and still photography is that video and film happen in time, and still photography happens in stop time. So there couldn't be anything more opposite. Yes, the viewfinder is the same in a way. You're still looking through a viewfinder. You're still composing a frame, but you're composing a frame in time as opposed to stopped time. So that's hugely different. I'm talking to people, I'm interviewing them perhaps, or I'm just walking around and filming, willy-nilly in the world, but that's happening in time. So it's about motion, it's about sound. So still
Yes.
photography is only about motion when you're using a long shutter speed, and but in a way that was the impetus to become a filmmaker, was the time involved in shooting with long shutter speeds and flash was a very filmic kind of idea for me because it both included motion and stop time. So that was sort of my gateway drug. The flash on the street with the long shutter speed was my gateway drug into filmmaking. And filmmaking was great because I could keep my ears open now and I could talk to people and I could, really investigate, chunks of time as opposed to just an instant in time. So that was very, very appealing to me and still is. And this is where I think I made that transition in 1992. I still kept making still photographs, but in 1992, when I began shooting video on the street in New York, I felt like I had, gotten a whole new lease on my life as an artist. I was as in love with filmmaking, really video making is what I'm talking about. Because then I got into film later. Video brought me to film, back to film, that is to say, motion picture film. And I started shooting Super 8, 16, and 35, both on the street but on a tripod, no longer, not handheld. I never have liked shooting motion picture film on handheld. I don't like that shaky look, at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a very, very easy and very smooth transition. And I kind of put still photography on the back burner. But the reason I did that was because by 1992, in all honesty, I felt like I had made the pictures I wanted already. The pictures that I wanted to make, were made primarily between 1977 when I started and 1992. And I felt like that I could transfer the same kind of discipline that I had from still photography into shooting video on the street. And I got incredibly lucky in being in Times Square at that time because Times Square was changing so radically and the old pop stores were going out of business and Giuliani was the mayor and he was getting rid of the pornography and he was getting rid of all of the fun and the joy in New York, having this very, very diverse, interesting place, Times Square, where people of all walks of life were welcomed and appreciated. It was like a speaker's corner. It was like London, the park in London, where people would come to speak their minds. So I had this ready, group of people that were eager to talk about religion initially, but it was much more than that. It was about politics and it was about ethics and morals and stuff. And, there was a whole world that I was missing as a still photographer and shooting video on the street opened that up to me. And so I felt like I had completed in a way this transition from still photography to motion video making and then filmmaking.
When the sound entered your project, you briefly mentioned this before, entered your project, so in the streets, of course, so the sirens, the conversations, the preaches and everything, did your way of composing the frame change or it had not really like an impact or an influence?
No, everything I learned in still photography, I put into the video. But the thing about still photography is it's very unforgiving. Still photography is very unforgiving. So you either make a great frame or you don't. It either works or it doesn't work. It's an either or situation. It's either an A or it's a B or a C, but in any event, it is a finality. But with filmmaking, you can walk into a situation and make a frame that isn't really all that interesting, perhaps. But in the time of shooting, you can subtly move the camera and find the place that you would find as a still photographer that is the perfect place, the exact right place to be. And it's very satisfying to see a frame, not in a herky-jerky way, but in a smooth way, see a frame evolve. And so in time, you see this frame that is not really necessarily all that interesting become incredibly interesting. And so that is really instructive, because then at that moment, the visual end of the filmmaking becomes very much like a still photograph. So I'll land on this really cool frame and maybe just leave it there and let the action happen within it. So you feel me finding the right place to stand in time. So that might happen in 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 seconds or something. But then when you get there, it's very, very appealing and very satisfying to see this frame, just come perfectly into focus. And then I stop and I don't move the camera anymore at all. So I like that. I like that, because life is like that.
Yes.
You're doing you're moving in time to find the place that you would find as a still photographer, and that's why filmmaking is a lot easier than still photography for me. It's a lot easier.
Interesting. Before you said this thing about people walking with the phone and looking down and everything, like that has interrupted the flow of the eye contact and everything. If a young photographer today wanted to follow your legacy, but decided again to never photograph people on their phones or anything like that, what should they look for? Like, where are the eyes of the city hiding for them?
Well, it's just a matter of looking through your viewfinder very, very carefully. That's the key to good still photography, is being able to scan, turning your eye into a scanner and seeing everything that's going on inside that rectangle. So but it's difficult. Everybody's on the phone, so it's very hard. It's very hard to do. And every person that's on the phone, almost without exception, is boring and unnecessary. They're somewhere else, like I said. But it's an etude. It's a study. It's a degree of difficulty that exists now that maybe didn't exist in the past. But there are people who don't give a darn. They say, "Big deal. This is
Fuck it.
reality. Everybody's on the
Yeah,
phone. Live with it, work with it, play with it." But I'm not interested in it, because unless people are doing something that's interesting, I don't want them in my frame. And if they're on the phone,
correct.
that's very
Out.
often it's not interesting. About 99% of the time, it's not interesting. They're just not there. So phones have ruined street photography.
There are many young photographers. I feel like in general, this is like a thing of the new generations. Like many young photographers in this sense are returning to film photography, to analog photography. I don't know, maybe it's a way of rejecting what we're living right now, the contemporary world and everything like that. Do you think that for you, is it a nostalgia trend or a psychological need to escape reality? How do you see that? Especially because you do film photography.
Well, I don't see an equivalence between film and digital. I think film is more beautiful all the, because film has continuous tone and digital's tone is stepped. So digital pictures look like, when they look good, they look like film. The best digital
Yeah,
pictures look like film. So why shoot digital? I mean, I understand why to shoot digital. You can see it right away, and that can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing, but it can be a good thing. And I think the return to film is a return to a more beautiful way of image making, and one with a higher degree of difficulty in many ways. Certainly, in terms of money, it's a higher degree of difficulty because it's more expensive now, because it's a niche market as opposed to the mainline practice, which it is no longer. But it's just more beautiful, and I've always loved it. I've loved working in the darkroom, making prints, and going through the whole entire procedure. I don't even scan my negatives. When I put pictures up on Instagram, these are scans of prints that I've made in my darkroom. I never scan the negative for what I put up on Instagram. It's prints that are made in the darkroom that I scan. So yeah, I just find film, and many young people are approaching me over time more and more about film, and wanting to learn, the various techniques of film once they get into digital and don't like it or whatever, want to make a transition. I'm happy to help them with their trans life.
I love that. It's perfect phrase, absolutely. And speaking of Instagram, it's, it's kind of funny though. Um, sorry. Looking and speaking of Instagram, as we were saying just now, like every day, anyone with the phone can be a street photographer. But do you think this and social media as well have democratized the medium, or just made it, or just devalued its poetic uh, core?
Well, it's certainly done that. Yes, it's both. It's absolutely both. It's a two-edged sword. Shooting film, you're careful. You're careful of what you shoot, particularly more now than in the past, when film was very inexpensive. You could go out and shoot 6, 8 rolls, and make the same number of pictures that digital people can make now easily. But by and large, you think more, and you're less likely to make a crappy picture. So I like that about film. I like the fact that it has limited means, that there's a discipline involved in doing it, because it gives you pause to say, okay, the green light went off in my head to make a photograph, but it was a light green. It wasn't a dark green. So you don't take that picture. You wait for the green light that's really green in your head. You wait for a moment that, really has some weight. It's an inexact process. You also don't always know at the moment of exposure for any of these processes, be they digital or film. You don't always know immediately that whether it was good or not. And of course, with film, you can't see it right away. But over time, you can find these things out, because images age in an interesting way. They seem to age on their own at times, it seems. But you just try to you maximize your practice as best you can. And I have this idea of a green light going off in my head. I like it when the pictures take me, when I don't think about making a photograph. It tells me, make me. I feel it's almost as if images have a life of their own, and they come together at moments that you absolutely have to photograph, and you don't even think about it. It's instinctive. Getting into that kind of flow. That's where I like to photograph from, is getting into a flow where, it's like, yes, 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 just, and I was amazed. I didn't think I was doing very well when I started out. For years, I thought I was not doing very well. And I kept struggling to, make pictures that had more and more and more meaning in them. But in that struggle to do that, I was already making those pictures. It was just, I set a very high bar for myself. Becoming a photographer, in the shadow of, Winogrand, Friedlander, Arbus,
So
so
many.
many other people, Roy DiCarava. There was a very high bar there. Many incredible photographers had made incredible work. And what was I going to do? It was, so their greatness challenged me to be as good as I could be, but I never would dare compare myself with any of these names I just mentioned. So it was a source of inspiration. And, then after a while, I saw that I was actually making pictures that reached that level. And,
Yes.
and I was kind of blown away by that fact. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I was on the right path. and that has stayed with me ever since.
It's so, so true. And what do you think is the most damaging thing of contemporary street photography on street photography that you see online, that you see with younger generations, where you see in others, if there's something, of course?
It's pretty amazing what you see online. Now, of course, it's very complicated by the use of, post-production techniques and AI to create, these amazing images. But just the fact that it's been many years that people have been like, take Alex Webb. He's probably the one of the most emulated photographers out there. The photograph of the person in the foreground of against, in shadow or something against a beautiful background. There are a number of people out there making Alex's picture, and
Yes,
and
it's
some of them
true.
are doing it as well as Alex. You know, it's amazing to see those images, and that's cool, but it's not unique. It's not. It doesn't seem like a unique vision. It seems like a copy, even though the copy can be even better than the original. That's great. All praise to the photographers that are able to do that. But I would like to try to make pictures that, we haven't seen before. I mean, you have all those pictures in your head. It's something of a burden to walk around with other people's pictures in your head, to clear. It's a good thing to look at work. It's a great thing to look at all the work
And
that's out
learn.
there, but
Yeah.
don't be emulating. Don't be trying to make that picture walk down the road that maybe that picture walked down, but make your own photograph. One of the things that I learned very early on was in 1977, the year I started photography, I was able to sit in on a wonderful class at Harvard University that I wasn't a matriculated student, but I was living with a Harvard family, a professor at Harvard, and he was able to help me get into this photo class that I could sit in on, just audit it, just be there. And it was taught by a guy named Ben Lifson. He was a terrific scholar of photography, and he was at Harvard teaching for one semester. And one of the lessons that he gave his students was to choose their favorite photographer. And at this time, for everybody, mostly it was Winogrand and Freelander and Arbus, and try to copy them. Try to copy them. Try to, walk the walk that they walked. Try to make Arbus's picture. Try to make Freelander's picture and Winogrand's picture, if that's who you chose. And you can't do it. You try to do it, but you can't really do it. But you walk that walk. You try to analyze their work and then try to make those pictures. And it was a very, very instructive lesson because although you could not copy that, you still were walking the walk of that picture, those pictures, and in doing so, approach the problems solving that they may have approached in making those pictures. Like try to go out and find Diane Arbus characters. You can do it, but
Yes.
how you put it into the frame, is another story. But it was a very good lesson because it's a little bit like classical music. Everybody plays Bach, everybody plays Beethoven, everybody plays Handel and Haydn and so forth, but everybody plays it just a little bit differently, and they make their own interpretation because everybody's fingers, everybody's musical sensibility is different. So it was a very good sort of etude, a study in how to approach photography. That was helpful to me.
And Richard, if you could distill everything you've learned over all these years on the sidewalk into one single, let's say, commandment for young photographers, what would it be?
Know yourself, who you are, what do you feel? You see what you feel. So that's the first thing is knowing yourself. and knowing what you want to, I wouldn't say knowing what you want to say so much as knowing what you want to question.
I love this.
Look,
Yes.
what are your questions? Put that into your photography, and don't say what they are. I mean, try to pose questions more than just show what's there. I love, but it can go both ways. I mean, Walker Evans, for instance, it was a genius at showing what's there, but in showing what's there, somehow he was able to incorporate sociological realities and social questions at the same time. That's a real skill. It's easier maybe to do it with people than it is with inanimate objects, but it's basically knowing yourself and, trusting yourself and nurturing the side of yourself that asks questions, because nobody really knows what's going on in life. Nobody has answers. Everybody has questions, but nobody has answers really, ultimately. We're
Yes.
living, we were born into this world without an operating manual. I mean, maybe Christianity is your operating manual, maybe Islam is your operating manual, maybe capitalism is your operating manual. Whatever it is, they're all very flawed. Uh,
Yes.
as long as you're questioning, you're leaving all subjects and all matters open to question. And those are the pictures that really work, the ones that state more questions than they answer, and where you are led in, as a viewer, you are led into an environment that's loaded with possible meanings without those meanings necessarily being defined. When you show my work in conjunction with this interview, there are a few of my pictures I think that get to that place. There's, maybe some dozens of them that actually get to that place.
Absolutely.
Been fortunate to make some, pictures that
Are incredible.
reach that high bar.
Absolutely. And this is like 100%. Richard, I feel like we concluded on a very high note. And I love this last talk that we had. And I want to thank you once again for being with me today. And I hope you felt comfortable as much as I did with you.
Yes,
And
yes. It's hard to do it so early in the morning, like, you're in the evening and I'm still
in
drinking
the morning,
morning coffee, so
I'll go get a glass of wine, I guess, then.
that I don't drink anymore. I stopped. I'm gone. No more for me.
Got enough.
I had my fun.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Richard, I thank you so much again. And I just want to leave a very, very small message to everybody who's watching. And I want to remind to keep liking and keep subscribing, because, again, what is a small click to you? It means the world for us to keep bringing you exclusive content. Richard,
Well, thank you for
thank you
doing
so
what you
much.
do. Thank you for Eyeshot and your
Thank you.
interviews and your books. And you've done a great, great service to the world of photography by bringing so many interesting people. I'm sure it's been quite a journey for you. I'd like to interview you, because now you've done,
I know so many things about all of you. Yes.
everything about all of us. So I look forward to your books, and what you write in response to all these people that you fabulous photographers that you continually interview, and I'm honored to be one of the people that you've interviewed.
I thank you so much. This is the sweetest thing I've ever heard. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, carry on.